because they're a barrier, and you go to Europe. And during the 10 years in which I developed medical devices, I did the same thing. But this wasn't good for patients in the United States. And FDA recognized this. They brought in experts from around the country called our entrepreneurs in residence, identified the problem, started to identify and create new solutions. And part of it was opening up my group of innovation within the office of the center director. And I'm very happy to report that we've moved ahead considerably with multiple new programs and new approaches. And as Paul mentioned, I may be a little bit unique in this in the FDA, but I truly consider the FDA as not a regulatory agency. That may sound funny because, of course, we're the only regulatory agency for medical devices, as well as drugs in the other centers. But I believe our primary purpose is to function as a healthcare agency to improve the healthcare of people in the United States and often around the world. And regulation is merely a process. That's how we go. Regulation is important, and we are here to help work with medical device developers to ensure that you get them to pay. I'll stop with that for a while and pick up a little bit later. Thanks.
Thanks, Murray. Terrific. We're going to hear a lot more about the work you're doing in a little bit. So let's move on then next to Danielle Faun, who's advisor for technology and innovation, also at CDRH. Danielle, you want to tell us about yourself and your work?
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to be here today. So I am an advisor for technology and innovation. I work with Murray on the CDRH innovation team and the payer communication task force. Murray's given a nice overview of that, so I'll leave that there. But I'm formally trained as a material science engineer, and I started out my career actually as a new product development engineer at W.L. Gore and Associates. And I've also worked internationally in the medical device ecosystem as a DAD scholar and Whitaker International Fellow in Australia. And I joined the FDA a few years ago, first as a lead reviewer in the gastroenterology endoscopy devices team, and most recently in my current role. So I'm really excited today to give the perspective of a new product development engineer of medical devices, as well as being a lead reviewer. So I've seen both sides. Thanks.
Thank you. Great to have you here, Danielle. Looking forward to the discussion. Now move on to Mike Billig. So Mike is the co-founder and CEO at Experien Group, one of our partners here at MedTech Innovator. Mike's been involved in the approval of hundreds of devices. So he's the guy you want to know. Mike, tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for the invitation as well. And it's very nice to be on this panel with both Murray and Danielle, who I've worked with in the past and continue to have a lot of respect for both of them. I got involved in this at a young startup company back in 1973, who has evolved to quite a mega power, Medtronic. And so that was my very first job, and it was a great position to be in pre-amendment time back in 73. Things have evolved considerably since then, and I have always been involved in the regulatory, quality, and clinical areas. And I guess about after Medtronic, I got involved pretty much in cardiology and cardiac surgery. Moved out to the West Coast, and my wife and I, she was actually my first employee at Medtronic back in 1974. So we've been married for 40 years, but more probably is equally challenging. We've been working together in the same company for 17 years. So it's been great. The two of us have a very seasoned group at Experien Group. We've got about 40 employees now, 2 facilities, unfortunately, which we're using at this time, one in San Jose and one in San Diego. And we get involved in pretty much, I don't think there have been too many technologies we haven't been involved in on the device side and combination product side, including regenerative medicine. So it's fun, it's great, it's challenging, and we have great companies that we work with. And I will say one statement that I've been doing this for 47 years, and I will say right now that I am having more fun and more challenge in a positive way with the FDA than I ever have. And I love the team they have there, and I love the way that as we're innovating in industry, FDA is innovating as well. And I think Murray will certainly talk about that as well. But thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I know it's pretty challenging, certainly, to be working at home and all the things we're doing and virtual meetings. And, this has been a really challenging time, but at the same time, it's been incredible for, I think the way we've all innovated in how we're doing what we're doing. Each of us here on the panel, including us here at MedTech Innovator, right? We've all done a lot of things this year virtually that we never did before. So I'm finding it to be, as you said, just as, more exciting than ever. So that's a benefit. So let's talk about some of those, trends and things that are happening in the regulatory environment, things that we should be aware of. A lot of the intent of this broadcast today, of this session, and our program is to help people avoid mistakes and open their eyes about things they may not know about. A lot of the people in our cohort are from all across the US, from all over the world, and they might be getting advice from somebody locally who has a little bit of experience in working with FDA and regulatory. And that experience just doesn't represent, all the realities of all the opportunities. So Murray, let me start up with you a little bit and just ask for some of your thoughts on what are things that people should know about that perhaps they don't know about, what are some of the trends that you're excited about in the regulatory environment. And then Mike can comment as well.
Great, thanks. I appreciate that. It's very interesting because when I joined the FDA, FDA was pretty well set in its way, in the way that it worked. And I'll relate a very quick story. I hope it's short. When Rob Califf came as the commissioner, I knew him in a prior life as he was a cardiologist and I was a heart surgeon. And he came to my office and said, "So tell me, what does FDA do the best?" And I didn't blink an eye. I told him, "Rob, we build silos. We build tall silos, thick silos, very difficult to knock down silos, and we do it better than anybody else." And he kind of chuckled and he asked me, "So what are you really trying to do?" I said, "Well, we're breaking those silos. My job, as well as others in the center, were to either get sledgehammers to knock down the walls or instead put in windows and doors and telephone systems." And so we've really changed the culture of working with companies and working with all of the stakeholders to be much more open, breaking down the silos, encouraging people to come and talk with us. And we go out and, in fact, we've got a small program that we're focused on right now, looking at new innovative startups that aren't necessarily coming to FDA, to reach out directly to them and say, where are you planning on doing your initial clinical trials? You might want to consider some of the newer programs that we have here. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the programs here, but I'll give you a second major trend, and that is patient-centeredness, that we have really focused most of our attention on that particular stakeholder group, which is we consider the most important stakeholder group. So many times, doctors and others develop products and consider endpoints based on what they are aware of, and it's often very different from what patients are aware of. And we have to also understand there's a very wide spectrum of risk tolerance and benefit needs in patient communities. So I think that's our other major trend, and we have different approaches. A patient family council we've opened, and several other approaches like that. So I'll stop there for the moment, but I think those are our two biggest trends: knock down the silos and put patients at the center of our activities.
Love it. Patient-centeredness is everything, right? That's something we preach all the time. Got to have the patient in the middle. Mike, any other comments you want to add about some of your, your experiences or observations?
I think today with what we're doing with pre-submission meetings and interaction with FDA, it's truly about collaboration and partnership, more so than any other time that I've been doing it. And there were many, many years where I would have very few meetings with FDA in DC. And a lot of it was writing back and forth and documents going. Pre-submission meetings were, back then they were called IDE, pre-IDE meetings. And they were infrequent, and it was primarily focused around IDEs. Today, it's about whether it's a Denovo, HUD, HDE, just every area that now there's a reason to have a alignment with FDA. And that really is what we're trying to do and what FDA is trying to do. Those meetings are so helpful and so worthwhile. It was so nice to be back in Washington face to face with everybody and sitting across the table. And I was on a panel with MDMA on the 13th of March, probably one of the last face-to-face meetings with FDA, 12th and 13th that week. And we had a meeting where we were going to have a lot of people come back to Washington FDI, and it stopped because we were a state of emergency, California. So it basically everything changed. And one of the things that I said on one of the panel that we did back at FDA was that I was worried about not having face-to-face meetings because they're certainly not as productive. I think what we're seeing is it can work. And certainly my preference is to be in front and talk and interact with FDA. But at the same time, we can interact this way in the same way we're doing it here with Zoom. I don't think it's preferred for me, but it does work. And it certainly is much more affordable for some of the young, small startup companies that are sending people back and forth to Washington. So it's truly, if I say one thing that really is changed in such a positive way, it's that interaction. And I hope it doesn't, it just continues to get better. In fact, when I talked to Jeff Shuren, probably back in April, I suppose, and was talking about some of these meetings, he said, well, I agree with you. The face-to-face is so much better. But he said, hopefully, if this happens, we'll be able to improve IT capabilities. And certainly, FDA does need help there, right, Murray?
Thanks.
All right, thank you. No, that's great to hear. And I'm glad to hear that the virtual meetings are working. And Murray, Danielle, so devices are still getting approved, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
All right, that's good to hear. And not just those under EUA. There's, all devices are still getting approved.
Business as usual, in addition to the COVID work.
That's great to hear. So one of the things that people always ask me about is, the difference between clearance and approval. So I want to hear this from you. What's the difference between clearance and approval?
So a device that's been cleared is a device that we're referring that went through the 510K process versus a device that you hear has gotten approved. That's really your pre-market approval device.
Thank you. So they're both good. It's just one has more clinical data, more evidence. It has a different type of pathway that
exactly.
Right.
And it's all about the lingo associated with each pathway.
Good. Okay.
Paul, if I might just comment
Please.
that the clearance process that we've had in place for a long time and we'll still have, the 510K process, is based on recognizing that the product is substantially equivalent to another product that's already on the market. But we're actually looking at other ways of recognizing that same type of substantial equivalent, and not so much in terms of its engineering or its material science or what it's to treat. It's also based on performance criteria. and we're heading towards a second type of clearance approach, a 510K clearance of a device based on performance criteria, because many times substantially equivalent to what? A lot of the predicates are old. A lot of the predicates we've seen don't necessarily do what we'd like them to do. And so being substantially equivalent to something else that's already marketed may have some advantages, but to be equivalent in terms of performance criteria. Are you as safe? Are you as effective? Are you more effective than the other product that's out there? I mean, there's no point in developing a product that is not as good as something that's already on the market, even if it's substantially equivalent. So it needs to be at least as good, if not better.
Right. And for a device that actually is approved, so, whether it's a new device, whether I guess it could be the PMA or also the Denovo pathway as well. I mean, we can clarify the Denovo in a second, but for those, is there a benefit to going through that pathway from it could be a marketing benefit, whatever it might be, but would you say there's a benefit to going through a Denovo or a PMA over just a 510K clearance?
I'll take that one, I guess. I think that if you got the support of your investors and you have the time and the money, it's probably preferable to get the PMA if you've got all those things covered, because you're going to have the most protection for competition over time. And everybody is going to have to do a very similar process. If you go through a 510K, you're substantial equivalent, hopefully improved from what the other got a basis for that to give edge. If you're a Denovo, you're basically going to be getting that product cleared, and I wouldn't say approved, I'd say cleared, that it would be cleared, but it's getting the but you're doing it based on a low to moderate risk, as opposed to it's not going to be a substantial equivalence. There isn't a product that's substantial equivalent. So you're looking at it's a low to moderate risk product that has the opportunity to bring forward based on the indications that you're looking for. And so if you can get that, what you're doing is you're allowing others then to come in and piggyback on you as a 510K. So that's why I say it's clearance, it's not approval. You get it, you're getting the petition granted, and then in essence, it's going to be a cleared product for everybody else after you have it. A little bit more consuming. Typically, there'll be more clinical studies. I think we might see 10 to 15% of 510Ks may have some clinical data. With Denovos, it's quite high because there isn't something you're trying to show that has a role, even though you don't have a predicate for it.
Great. Thanks, Mike, for clarifying that. Also, Danielle, yes.
Yeah, so I was just going to add, from the lead reviewer perspective, a lot depends on what your indications for use statement is and the technology of your device. So that determines the risk, as well as, comparing that indications for use statement to other devices that have already been cleared, whether there's a predicate out there. And so that really kind of determines your pathway that you're slated to go through at the FDA.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that as well. All right, so let's move on then and talk about some of the opportunities that are out there. One that we've heard a lot about, especially lately, given the CMS proposed rule for coverage, is the breakthrough device pathway. So maybe I'll start off and just kind of ask you, Murray, to tell us a little bit about the breakthrough device pathway and what people should be thinking about when considering that option.
Great, thanks, Paul. Actually, Breakthrough Devices program and pathway has had a long history through our innovation group. It was back in 2011, 2012, when our entrepreneurs and residents came together and said, we ought to have a different way in which we can approve products that are really, really important, really necessary for people. Those products that are intended to diagnose or treat life-threatening or irreversibly debilitating medical conditions for which there's an unmet need. There are no alternatives. So these are different, very kind of extreme cases. And if we do have products that can deal with that, either in terms of diagnosis or treatment, we'd like a different pathway. And so originally we created the innovation pathway, and we had several features within that program that eventually morphed and evolved into the expedited access pathway, because that was really the approach we were taking, was to expedite access of these innovative products to people who needed them. And then in 21st Century Cures, just a couple of years ago, the expedited pathway became extinct, and we developed the breakthrough program. And so we've continued to refine this approach. Now, it's a very, very specific type of program. Again, it's only for certain types of medical devices. Life-threatening or irreversibly debilitating conditions is the primary criteria. And the secondary criterion include that the device actually has a substantial improved benefit compared to something else that is out there, can treat an area that nothing else can treat for unmet need, or is in the best interest of the patient. And so FDA will designate some of these products on a voluntary basis from the sponsor if they'd like it to be considered breakthrough, and make a determination that that device will be designated as a breakthrough device. Now, with that brings all sorts of other approaches. First of all, it gets expedited throughout our review program. Second of all, we generally put a senior FDA personnel on it to kind of shepherd it and get it through the system a little bit quicker. But in addition, and I think this is the most important part, is in order to really expedite access, we may, in some cases, approve putting that product on the market with greater uncertainty than we might have otherwise, because there is damage that can happen and harm that can come to people who don't get this device if we believe that there's the good reason to believe that it will improve healthcare. And then we will capture the remainder of that data, the remainder of the certainty in the post-market. And we've been able to do that by substantially improving post-market data collection. I'm not going to go into a lot of the details, but we've developed new registry type systems, coordinated registry networks, the entire NEST program that is specifically designed to capture the post-market data. So we've gone from a very rigorous, here you are in pre-market, you need this much information before you go on. And then you're in the post-market and we kind of watch what happens, to having it more continuous, that in the pre-market for some devices, these breakthrough devices, we're going to put on the market earlier and watch that device throughout its total product life cycle into the post-market for the remainder of the data that it shows that it is there's a reasonable assurance of safety and efficacy. And in addition, we've been fortunate enough that the payers, primarily CMS, have developed two specific programs that help medical device developers at this very, very critical stage. The first is called the MCIT program, Medicare Coverage for Innovative Technology, in which they will accept FDA's designation as breakthrough to trigger an alternative pathway for coverage, as well as for new technology add-on payment, where there will be the presumption of automatic coverage for approximately 4 years. There's a lot of details in that, as well as additional new technology add-on payments for 3 or 4 years, and there's still a lot of details. But generally, CMS is also helping these devices get to patients earlier and helping the device manufacturer sustain its program to develop these very, very specific new high-tech breakthrough medical devices.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Paul, if I just add on to that. The Innovation Pathway 2.0 program that Jeff Shuren had started, that's where Murray was absolutely sensational in working with 4 different companies. And I was pleased to be one of those companies that we worked together for probably over a year, Murray, and very frequent contact with FDA, with the company trying to understand. FDA was trying to understand the company. The one I was working with was Silicon Kidney out in San Francisco with Shubho Roy. And it was working with Ben Fisher's group, which is where Danielle was before she came to Murray. And so it was a fabulous program. And I spoke about it a number of times on panels, and everybody would they were almost gagging. They didn't want to hear about it anymore because they thought, what is this doing for us? It's 4 companies. Well, this is what it's done for everybody else, is you came up with the breakthrough program. You came up with the early feasibility IDEs. There were so many good things that came out of that frequent interaction that FDA doesn't have the opportunity to do that with a lot of companies. So it was 4 companies that they worked with over this year and a half period of time to basically try to go back to the drawing board and see how they could integrate this into something that could scale with a lot of companies. And I think they've done a fabulous job with that.
It's great. I know we've had a number of companies. I mean, over the years that I've been involved with, who looked at, the expedited pathway, the innovation pathway, and now breakthrough. So very excited to see how that's evolved and the possibilities. And certainly the proposed rule from CMS, I think, is a great start towards what should hopefully be much faster access for patients to some of these technologies, which, what I think we're all trying to do here, but of course, safe first and effective as well. So very excited about that. Let's move on and talk a little more about some of the work going on. Murray, you mentioned payers and some of that work. So perhaps Danielle, you could tell us a little bit about some of the work that CDRH in particular is doing with payers and what some of those opportunities might be for innovative companies.
Absolutely. So we have a group called the Payer Communication Task Force. And within our task force, we manage 2 programs, the first being Parallel Review, and the second being our Early Payer Feedback Program. So Parallel Review has been around since 2011, and that offers an opportunity for CMS and the FDA to review a Denovo or a PMA devices data in parallel, with the goal of, at the end of receiving, hopefully, a positive FDA decision, CMS also has a national coverage decision within a short amount of time. So that's reducing the amount of time it takes for a device to get to patients. And so our other program, which is very popular, as I said, the Early Payer Feedback Program, offers an opportunity for companies to be connected with private and public payers, as well as health technology assessment groups. And these are organizations such as CMS, Kaiser, Blue Cross Blue Shield Association, United Healthcare, and the best time for a company who's thinking about this program is to come to us when they're preparing to submit a pre-submission meeting, when they're going to discuss their plans for clinical evidence. And at that time, we can extend an invitation to the payers to see if they're interested in also providing feedback. And by engaging the payers at this early stage, hopefully avoid companies running into a problem that once they get their FDA decision, they don't have a situation where they learn from payers that, oh, we wanted a different clinical study. We wanted this additional information. So hopefully you can reduce the amount of clinical studies that are completed to, again, shorten that time for a device to reach patients. And so those are the two programs that you can find out more information about on our website, the Payer Communication Task Force, and we also have an email inbox that you can email us, and we monitor daily. And we're happy to set up a time and tell you more about those two programs.
That's great. Super helpful to understand how that works. Maybe Mike, you could just add a little bit here, because I know you've been involved with some of the meetings where the Payer Task Force, the Payer Communication Task Force, have been attending. So any quick comments you can make on what that experience has been like from your side?
Yeah, I think it's been very good. I think that, we've been a little bit, it took us a little longer to get involved in it because we've been working with FDA without the payer, and we don't do reimbursement for so long. And I think so. One of the things that needs to happen is you need to be doing each one of those independent of one another too. So you're not just coming together at that pre-submission. I think there's a little bit of education that has to be done, and I'm sure Danielle would totally agree with that. But I think the important part is that both of them are going to be very interested in that clinical program and what you're doing to be able to show that that product is safe and efficacious, and that all the reasons that they want to, that they're going to reimburse it for, they want to be able to see that evidence in the study. And so that's where you get the benefit. I think that it definitely is a meeting that will take longer than the typical meeting, simply because you've got two entities that are both interested in similar things, but they go about it a little bit differently. So it's still evolving, but I think that it's got some good opportunities ahead of it. And I think there are certainly some cases where it's going to be more important than others, but it's something that somebody should look at the beginning and decide whether or not they want to bring it together. I don't know how many meetings they're having these days, Danielle. We're probably bringing in CMS, or we're trying to bring in CMS, maybe, I don't know, I'd say maybe 10% of the time or less. What are you seeing with some of the other pre-sub meetings that you've been at, and the fact that CMS is also being involved? Is it more than that?
So we see a subset of payers who are available to attend the pre-submission meetings. There's also opportunity, once you have established that contact, you can have meetings. That contact is yours, and you can have meetings outside of the pre-submission process and have further discussions, because obviously it's a lot to pack in an hour meeting.
It is. And when we've done it, it's been an hour and a half, and I think they've been very appreciative and given us that extra time. But it is an important part to make sure that both you're getting feedback from both to be able to best design that clinical study.
Yeah, no, I think that, to me, that's the real key, is just to get input early, right? And that's for everything. That's why pre-sub's around. That's why bringing in the payers early as possible. So, again, it's all about getting these innovations to patients faster, and not having that linear, we get approval or we get clearance, and then we start, reaching out to payers. So I think that's probably the advice. Maybe just quickly, Danielle and Murray, but I'll start with Danielle. As far as pre-subs, in general, the pre-sub process, we still have people, and again, whether it's in MedTech Innovator or just in general, we'll still hear people saying like, oh, I'm not doing a pre-sub. Tell us again, kind of like, what are the, briefly, what's the advantages of doing a pre-sub? And then secondly, just any tips that you want to share, like what are things that people should be doing to prepare properly for coming in for a pre-sub?
Sure. So pre-subs are great. First off, they're free, and it's getting access to the FDA review team and getting their input. It's great to be at a place where you have some specific questions to ask of the review team. Otherwise, you might have the review team saying, well, I don't really know what to say at this point. Like, there's no indications for use statement. They're uncomfortable of giving any further, like, quite specific feedback because they don't know the parameters of the device. But if you're not at that stage and you want to talk to FDA, you can always have an informational meeting. So you just, it's a different type of Q-Sub, and you just submit information and you have a 1-hour open discussion with the review team, and there's no expectation that the FDA will provide any feedback, but there's often, you know, some comments made and that are helpful, and it's an opportunity to get to know the review team. But in general, like, don't be afraid to come talk to the FDA. I mean, I can speak to my experience since 2017. We are working to have your device get to a positive outcome. So the more that we can talk to you, the more that we can help you and provide additional information and resources. In our eyes, the better we see that you'll be off and getting to where you want to go faster. So that's my thoughts about the pre-submission process, as well as informational meetings.
Great, that's really helpful. And for pre-subs, one other question that you know, people ask is, do I need to have, you know, again, Mike, no offense to you, but do I need to have a regulatory, you know, consultant or a firm I'm working with to go in and work with before, or can anyone go in and have a pre-sub?
We serve the American people, so we have no requirements that you need a consultant, a lawyer with you, or so on. So, you know, come as yourself, as a, you know, an American person, or someone working in the United States for that matter, or internationally as well. Thank you.
You answered my next question. Is this for international companies as well? Right. So it is open to people, even if you're not based here in America.
Anyone who wants to sell their medical device in the United States.
Thank you.
I might just say that in the pre-sub meetings, that one of the things that companies should really try to do is to tell their story in their own words, in their own way. Nobody needs to impress anybody with any fancy charts and anything else. The company that has been working on this device has often been working on it with a large team for many, many years, and understand what they want this product to do. Translate that information for the FDA review team so that they have a thorough understanding. Bring mock-up prototypes, show them the product, let them see how it works, describe the materials that you're going to be using, what your intended use is, why you want to use it, what sort of outcomes you might expect. So really just laying everything out for FDA in a story. You know, we've had many reviewers who will often say, well, you got a story, it's a book, it's 200 pages. If we tore out all those 200 pages and we shuffled them up and we put them back into the book and we hand it over to a reader will never understand what it is that the story is all about. And many times when we get the story about the medical device, it's as if all the pages have been pulled out and shuffled back together. It's not a story. Telling the story is very, very important to really help FDA fully understand what's in the mind of the developer.
Yeah, and Mike, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I did. I think that, you know, I said earlier that I think pre-submission meetings are fabulous, or really, really give you that alignment with FDA. But they're not necessary for a number of products. If you have a product that's so straightforward and it's truly a Me Too product, and everything has been covered, all the testing has been covered, there's probably no need to do that. You know what you're doing, you've got that to bring forward. I think where the pre-sub comes in is when you have questions, you want to decide whether or not I should do animal testing, or if I do, what kind of a program I should put it through. I have certain materials that I might be using that are a little bit different. Where it is where you actually have questions you want to present to FDA and you want to get their buy-in, and they may not be able to give you at that meeting, but they're certainly going to think about it and they're going to get back to you. You know, there are many times that you go through that process and you go, boy, I'm sure glad that I had that meeting because I really did get something out of it. The informational meeting, I've had a few of those too, and I think that's a great meeting when you're trying to give a you're planning out products, you're planning out a new program, and you want to, you don't have any specific questions for FDA, but you want to give them an appreciation and align them with where you're going and what you're intending to do. And they have a much more better understanding when you do ultimately come in for that pre-sub meeting because of what you've done with that informational. But you're really laying the seed. You're not trying to get anything specific from them, but you're trying to educate them on your plan for this new technology or this new product area. And they're good. But you don't have them as often. They're just not. You really want to have that meeting where you're going to get feedback from FDA, and they give that feedback. They've been giving it pretty regularly now ahead of time. I remember many times where we'd be landed in Washington and we'd get the feedback and we'd have to change our slides. That's a thing of the past. It really has been a good week beforehand, and sometimes two.
Thanks, Mike. And just the last thing on pre-subs that I'll comment on is that some of our companies have had 6 pre-subs. It's not like you just have a single pre-sub where you go in one time and you get one chance to, talk or ask questions, right? You can continue to do that. So I think that's terrific. And thank you guys for doing that. Let me move on and just ask a couple last questions because the live broadcast only lasts about another 10 minutes. So I want to make sure we cover some of these things. One of the things that I saw this week was the announcement by FDA of its new Digital Health Center of Excellence with Bakul Patel as the founding director, which I thought that was great. And I know there's certainly also the Oncology Center of Excellence. So maybe just briefly, can you just tell us, what does that mean for FDA to have a Center of Excellence? And, and just briefly explain, why FDA is doing that and what that means perhaps for, for innovation in general. So either Murray or Danielle.
I'll kick it off a little bit. I'll preface this by saying that, the Digital Health Center of Excellence is brand new. It was just announced a couple of days ago. But of course, I work with Bakul quite a bit and I understand what's going on in his mind, but it's probably going to be changing and evolving, and it will be best to communicate with them directly, and they have their own mailbox. But essentially, the concept is that developing digital products, which are software based, either software as a medical device or software components within a medical device, are developed at a different speed and with different technologies than an actual hard medical device made out of plastics materials or other types of living tissue. These are often algorithms, often artificial intelligence, often software-based that can be written overnight, and you've got a different speed and a different time frame for what you're working with. And so it's been very important for FDA to live in that world. And that's what the Center of Excellence is about. It gives the FDA an opportunity to engage with digital health developers in a different way, much more rapidly. We have developed what is called the pre-certification program, where we say that if your company has demonstrated the ability to have a quality systems program, and that quality systems program has been evaluated by FDA and it's been found to be appropriate, then we may give you this pre-certification program that you can go ahead and make changes and notify FDA later, and we'll look at it as it comes along. So it's a totally different approach to medical device development than traditionally would occur with other types of medical devices, either diagnostic or therapeutic.
Thanks for putting a little color on that, shedding some light. Thank you. That's super helpful. And maybe in our private Q&A, we can talk a little more about some of those questions that some of the software or companies that have more on the software side, and I may direct those to Mike later. So we'll get into that in the private Q&A. And also, again, since we started the live broadcast late, I'm going to give us another 5 or 6 minutes for that. So I want to talk a little bit also about some of the initiatives at FDA for gathering evidence
Sure. So Nest is an evolving program over a period of over 10 years that actually began with the notion of surveillance in the post-market. So, when FDA approves a product or clears a product and puts it on the market, we never have 100% certainty that that product is going to be safe and effective for many, many reasons. First of all, we can't test every population. Second of all, we can't run clinical trials for 5 and 10 years. There could be late occurring problems that we don't see in the clinical trials. So when we put a product on the market in the pre-market space based on even on a clinical trial, we're not 100% certain. We're fairly certain, and the law requires just a reasonable assurance of safety and efficacy. Nonetheless, we know that it's critically important to follow those products in the future and to continue to maintain information about adverse events and other factors. Now, in the past, we had developed a program called MAUD, where we would, in a voluntary way, ask doctors, hospitals, and patients to report adverse events, and we would get a lot of these, but they're very difficult to actually identify. In many cases, before we're able to really institute a unique device identifier, we actually weren't certain which device they were even talking about. It might be an aortic valve that failed, developed a thrombus in it, and we don't know exactly which valve. Sometimes we may know the company, we may not know which model because that part hasn't been reported. So one of the critical factors was to develop unique device identification so that that travels with the device, so that as we continue watching that product into the post-market, we continue doing it with the UDI. Furthermore, we can tap into other types of data sources in the post-market that we didn't have access to in the past. When I was a physician and I would see my patient in the office or in the hospital, you'd learn about how that medical device interacted with that patient in a handwritten note that would be on a piece of paper in a file cabinet that nobody would have access to. And even if they did, they wouldn't know how to use that information. Now with digital and electronic health systems, with electronic claims data, we can rapidly identify with a particular medical device if it has a problem. Someone's going to see a doctor, someone's going to come into the hospital, some event is going to occur generally and link to a claim, a medical insurance claim that then we can capture and have a better idea what goes on. So we've supported those types of systems. And the last, which is where we're really going with our NEST program, which is National Evaluation System for Health Technology, are to develop what we have described as CRNs, Coordinated Registry Networks, where we take existing or sometimes new registry formats, and as medical devices are utilized either in a hospital or outpatient, that information goes into that registry to identify, including certain particular elements that we have decided in advance. We need to identify the UDI, the user of the device, et cetera, and then we can continue to follow that and use that data and that information in the post-market. And it's that balance between pre-market and post-market data collection that we now have much better ability to look at, which is supporting our whole approach called a total product life cycle, or TPLC. And so we're not so much concerned as we used to be about that artificial line between pre-market and post-market. We want to look at the product throughout its total life cycle and continue capturing data. And the NEST program now has about 10 demonstration projects that demonstrate how data can be captured with accuracy and with ease, and different systems through the National Library of Medicine. The Medical Device Innovation Consortium, MDIC, of which FDA is a partner, has been named and granted funds to be the coordinating center for the NEST program. And I think we'll see a lot of great activities coming out of there with substantially improved management of medical devices as well as healthcare for our population.
Terrific. Thank you for that explanation, Murray. And, obviously that could be a whole nother webinar and discussion just to talk about post-market. So let's take a couple minutes here and kind of wrap up before we go to the Q&A. So I want to start off and give everybody a chance to give us some, again, some tips, maybe, whether you want to flag kind of mistakes that you see people making and kind of some tips for addressing those. So just again, you're talking to companies from the early stages who've never interacted with the FDA, and companies that are interacting with the FDA as we speak, and those that are, that have had many interactions with FDA, but everyone can learn. So, anything that, you think would be valuable for people to take as a leave here with a takeaway. So I'm going to start with Mike and just let you share some of your thoughts on, again, just general advice, general tips. And if you want to flag something that, you think people should avoid, would love to hear it, and then we'll go on. So Mike.
Sure. Well, I think that be comfortable. FDA is someone who's trying to help, but be prepared. Don't call them up and waste their time. You want to be organized. You want to know the information that you're going to try to convey to them, and don't waste any of their time because they've got so many things to do, and especially today with COVID. I mean, I just handed to them for what they've done, the submissions they're seeing in spite of what they've taken on with COVID. It's amazing at how well they've been doing, and we're still getting our times that we're hoping for as a result of our regular submissions, 510Ks, IDEs, and the like. So they've got a lot on their platter, and they are very, very willing and open to discussion, but make sure that there's a purpose in it and use it well. Don't be afraid to go to them. Go to them early. FDA says go early, go often. Often is a little bit costly, a little bit time consuming. Go early. Get the foundation. Get a good report, get started, and as you need to add on to that. But I think that they're great to work with, and I enjoy my days today more than I have in the last 40. I'm going on 47 years with working with FDA, going back to pre-amendment days when I first, and then I didn't do very much, but I started in the 75, 76 timeframe, and a lot of good things happening today, and a lot of these good programs, guidances, materials that are coming out that make it much more aware, make you more aware of what needs to be done and how you can value that relationship.
Thanks, Mike. Very helpful. Danielle, so, you've been a reviewer as well as, working on the innovation side, some of these other programs. So any advice you want to give companies, any thoughts you want to leave people with?
Yes. First, when you're putting together your submission, it's really helpful if it's a searchable PDF, as well as if it's interactive, and that you use one common numbering system when you're numbering all your pages of your submission. That can really speed up our process of looking through things and then getting back in touch with you to work out any issues within the time that we're allowed. So anything that slows us down that might lead to us having to, running out of time and submitting something a letter formally to you. Along those lines, submitting over holidays is a strategy I've seen many companies use to try to reduce the amount of time that reviewers have to look at the submissions. So submitting on a Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock. I've seen that backfire a lot because we don't have as much time to look at it. And again, we are working to have your device reach a positive outcome. So when we don't have as much time, we can't interact with you as much to resolve those issues. And then we have to put all that into a formal letter. And then the last takeaway, Mike has touched on it, like engage FDA early and often as well, engage those payers through our early payer feedback program. Thanks.
Thank you. And Murray.
The last comment I would say is be sure that you describe to FDA the patient-centeredness of your product. What is it trying to do? How is it going to help patients? Even a product that might not be as safe or as effective as you might want it to be, if there's an advantage for patients for it, we may provide some advice, some things that we've seen to improve the quality or functionality of your device so that patients get either better or faster diagnostics, more accurate diagnostics, or better therapeutics to get them over whatever health issue that they happen to have. So we're on the same side as the device developer. Recognize that this isn't a battle. We're not on different sides of the net on a tennis court. We're teammates. We want to work with you. And read the guidances that we put out. Well, there are a lot of guidances. They're all public. If you're having trouble finding them, you get in touch with us somehow. We have a program called DICE, which is a division for industry and consumer education that can point you to certain guidances, or our payer communication task force if you're interested in that. And you get a good idea as to what we're interested in, but also recognize that we're not prescriptive. We're not saying that you have to do things X, Y, and Z. If you think there are reasons because of your device that you want to test it or evaluate it in a different way, present it. It's logical thinking, and we'll look at it. And if it seems to fit the bill, we'll say, okay. So we're trying to work together with you and to help improve healthcare of our population.
That is a great way to end the discussion. So on that line, Murray, thank you very much for working with all of us to help bring these technologies to patients. It is a really important thing you're doing and that all these companies are doing. So thank you for that. Thank you, Mike, as well. Your company is first class. We love interacting with you. And I know our companies in our portfolio have had a lot of incredible experiences with you and your team. So thank you for that as well. So let me close out here again. For anyone who's been watching this on our YouTube channel or who's watching an archive later, these webinars are available every week. Same time, you can go to the medtechinnovator.org/live page to see an archive of all of our webinars and all of our broadcasts, as well as this one. If you want to follow up with Mike or with the FDA innovation team, we'll provide some links for how you can do that as well. And we welcome you to keep coming back. Also to join us for the MedTech Innovator Finals and Execution Award competitions, which are going to be broadcast on September 30th for our Execution Award competition, on October 6th for our finals. This is the first year we're going to live stream those, so we're going to provide links where people can watch those. If you're an attendee of the MedTech conference, you'll be able to vote for those. If you're part of the MedTech Innovator ecosystem, you'll be able to vote for those as well. The first prize is going to be $350,000 of non-dilutive funding. And we're also going to give out another $150,000 of non-dilutive funding to other companies as well. So very exciting. There'll be JLabs awards and all sorts of other exciting things happening in those broadcasts. So please do go to medtechinnovator.org/live to find out about that. And even just our homepage will have some links where you can learn more as well. So once again, thank you to our panelists. Thanks, Mike, Murray, Danielle. You guys can all say goodbye to our YouTube streamers, but stay on for the MedTech Innovator companies.
Okay, we will.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Paul.
you.
Thank you.